Welcome to Podkey Fantasy Football, where preseason noise meets actual draft logic. A couple August storylines already changed real draft rooms. The hard part is figuring out which ones revealed something structural and which ones just triggered overreaction. Week 1 preseason matters a little more than it used to because teams are actually showing starters and real personnel ideas. But it still gives you evidence, not proof. A clean debut from a quarterback or a rough outing from another guy can tell us about reads, route concepts, protection, and intended usage without settling the player's season outlook in one night. The right takeaway is usually about role and team intent. The wrong takeaway is treating a tiny sample like a verdict. Jeremiah Love is the clearest example of preseason information cutting both ways. Arizona gave a rookie 14 carries in a low-leverage game, and now we're talking about a high ankle sprain instead of a breakout path. The criticism lands because the downside was obvious, and the upside of that workload was tiny. Even if Love comes back on schedule, the team now has every excuse to manage touches and let Tyler Algier siphon work. That doesn't prove long-term failure, but in redraft it changes the question from ceiling to early season usability, and that's a major downgrade. Jordan Tyson is different, but maybe worse for fantasy. A recurring hamstring across college, the pre-draft process, rookie camp and training camp stops looking like bad luck and starts looking chronic. If the likely absence is 5 to 8 weeks and maybe longer, then redraft managers need a real discount, not a polite one. Dynasty can hold the talent story. Best ball can absorb the dead roster spot. Standard redraft usually can't. There's also a team-level effect here. If Tyson is out, the Saints may lean heavier with 2 tight ends and condensed looks, which quietly boosts Juwan Johnson and changes how we think about secondary pass catchers. Keenan Allen landing with the Colts on a 1-year deal is one of those moves where the fantasy impact is more about redistribution than raw offense growth. The confirmed part is simple. Indianapolis just added a veteran target earner with experience in Shane Steichen's system, and that raises the floor of the receiving core immediately. The speculative part is volume. Allen probably doesn't need to become a monster focal point to hurt Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, and Tyler Warren. He just needs to absorb the high-percentage drive-sustaining work that was previously available. That's why Allen makes sense for older roster builds as an early starter, while the younger Colts receivers lose some ADP appeal. Downs especially gets squeezed because the useful underneath targets now have a real competitor. Buffalo might be offering one of the more actionable preseason role clues. Khalil Shakir lining up outside on 57% of snaps, with a 15.5-yard average target depth suggests this may not be the old underneath-only version of his role. If that sticks, and if Keon Coleman's injury keeps him limited, then the hierarchy sharpens. DJ Moore as the likely primary receiver, Shakir as a potentially more fantasy-friendly perimeter option, and everyone else fighting for scraps or specialized work. What supports the Moore optimism is the early chemistry with Josh Allen and his familiarity with Joe Brady. What still needs confirmation is whether Shakir's outside deployment survives once the full receiver room is available. The Najee Harris signing tells us the Giants did not feel settled in their backfield, and that matters more than any optimistic camp spin around Cam Scatterbo or Tyrone Tracy. When a team adds a veteran on a 1-year deal this late, it usually means they want reliability somewhere, whether that's early downs, pass protection, or both. That lines up with the preseason concerns. Tracy's pass protection has been shaky, and Scatterbo's footwork questions didn't exactly disappear, so the clean bell cow projection gets harder to defend. Scatterbo can still be a useful risk-reward pick, but the market has to price him like a committee back with contingent upside, not like role clarity already exists. At the macro level, fantasy is drifting back toward running backs because pass rates have softened, and recent RB health was unusually strong. That explains why elite backs are being pushed back toward the top of drafts. Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs being consensus anchors makes sense. Christian McCaffrey still has league-winning upside, but the workload age risk is no longer a footnote. The historical hit rate after massive touch seasons is not encouraging. The more controversial cases are the round 2 and dead zone backs. Chase Brown has a better argument than many peers because the receiving role is already proven and the competition is still mostly theoretical. Derrick Henry and Ashton Genty each have clear scheme-based upside, but they get there differently. Henry needs Baltimore to keep feeding goal line and efficient box counts. Genty needs the Raiders' new structure to actually translate into the workload people are projecting. The dead zone warning still holds. In those middle rounds, paying for low receiving committee backs on mediocre offenses is how rosters get stuck. If you're buying uncertainty, it's usually better to buy a handcuff with a defined contingency path. That's why names like Blake Corum, Tank Bigsby, Ray Davis, Marshawn Lloyd, Tyler Algier, and Emmett Johnson matter. The appeal isn't that they already have feature roles, it's that their path to one is understandable. And because running backs rarely give you full season availability, depth is not a luxury pick. About half of your early selections are likely to disappoint cost or miss time, so the winning move is staying flexible and aggressive on waivers. Late bench spots should be treated as temporary tests unless they're attached to true contingent upside. Inaction is a roster decision too. At receiver, Zay Flowers still stands out as a clean analytical buy. A 29% target share and top-tier yardage in a low-volume passing offense suggests the role is real, and touchdown regression could still help. Veteran discounts like Chris Godwin and Mike Evans also make sense if their market price keeps drifting below role reality. Those aren't sexy picks, but they don't need a speculative leap to pay off. At tight end, the signal to chase is route involvement and target share, not random touchdown streaks. Juwan Johnson gets more interesting if Tyson misses time, and late-round options like Harold Fannin or Kenyon Sadiq only matter if they're actually running routes consistently. One of the simplest edges right now is platform-specific ADP. Cross-site pricing differences are real, and they matter even more because league size and scoring defaults change the risk you can tolerate. Caleb Williams is the cleanest example. If ESPN is pricing him around QB11 and the broader market or analyst ranks have him meaningfully higher, that's exactly the kind of structural discount you want to exploit. Quarterback timing in general still depends on format. In 1QB leagues, waiting remains viable unless an elite option falls into a value pocket. The mistake is following a rigid rule when the board is giving you something else. The through line this week is simple. Chase role clarity, discount fragile narratives, and make the market prove its assumptions. That's it for Podkey Fantasy Football. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.